So I want to welcome everybody this evening, and we are having this webinar tonight with Executive Director David Archuleta, and we're going to get started here in just a minute. We're going to have David, he's just going to walk us through a few things, and then if you have questions that you would like to ask David, we will have the chat remain open, and we will field questions that way. So hopefully we can learn a little bit from David, and you'll have a chance to meet this person that we're all going to be dealing with probably for a good long while. So and we've got one of your board members has joined us, Mary Lou Cameron. So she's my NEA mom. I just thought I would tell you that. I have an NEA daughter as well. I don't see her on the call because she's probably not thinking about retirement yet, but soon, but she will be soon. So let's go ahead and get started, David, because I do like to start on time. And as people, you know, as they log on, they'll continue to join us. Now, I was looking up to see, are you from New Mexico? Are you a native New Mexican or?
Born and raised in Santa Fe.
Well, there you go.
Outside of that short stint that I lived in Albuquerque while attending UNM, I've come back to Santa Fe and made this my permanent home.
You know, and I kind of suspected you were from around here. I don't know why I thought that. I just had that feeling. And I know that I've known you for several years when I served on the New Mexico Public School Insurance Authority Board, and you were with retiree healthcare. So we know you're very knowledgeable about a lot of things. And we also know that you're super new in this new position. And so, yeah, if you don't know something, just, I don't know. I mean, we're teachers and we don't know everything either. So, and that is the answer we give when we don't, or we try to bluff our way through, but kids can always see through us. So at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, David. And I just want to thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you for that introduction. I'll go ahead and start by trying to share my screen, and I apologize if I mess up because I'm not as familiar with Zoom as I am with GoToMeeting or basically Teams that we use all too often now. But I'll go ahead and pull up my presentation here. I think, can you see my presentation? Are we looking at that?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, let me see if I can get to the presentation section of it where I am. I think if I move this over here, up this,
and I want to welcome all our hardworking educators. We know times have been hard, and we are here to help ease any transitions that you may be making into retirement or returning back to work if you've already been retired for a little bit. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Mary. Again, my name is David Archuleta. I'm the Executive Director of the Educational Retirement Board. Thank you for asking me to join you here today to present the information. This is my first time presenting this sort of information, sort of specific to the whole retirement process, but I figured it would be a great learning experience for me. It would give me an opportunity to, one, communicate with our educators and get them to somewhat become familiar with my face and sort of my role in the organization. And certainly at the end of this presentation, if there are any questions, concerns, or comments, I'd be happy to give you my personal information, my telephone number, and my email address so that you can email me directly in case there's anything we need to follow up on. But with that, I've sort of modified a standard presentation that we have that is also available on our website. This includes 35 slides. If anyone would like the full copy, which goes into some detail about registering for an account, getting set up, calculating your benefit, what happens when you return to work, when can you expect your payroll checks to become effective. Lots of great information. It's available on our website, and certainly I'd be glad to circulate that information and provide it for Mary to distribute to everyone. And then secondly, just before I get started, I'd like to thank all the teachers that are on with me now. I can't tell anyone other than looks like Mary and Steve to be participating, but to thank you for your service. I know that based upon my own experience having an 8 and 10-year-old at home, the last 2 years were a big challenge. I know that they were a challenge for teachers, they were a challenge for parents, and I surely have a greater appreciation for the work that you all do. So thank you very much for that. And I will go ahead and get started with the first couple slides. So basically, starting off, what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to point you to some resources that I feel would be helpful for people to consider both registering for and looking at as they look to answer some of the most commonly asked questions. We've got a lot of information up on our website. I think for the most part, it's fairly intuitive and easy to navigate to, but certainly looking for opportunities to improve that information that we're producing, because if we can provide all the information that is necessary on our website, but if people can't access it or they're having problems finding it, it's not of real use to anyone. So again, appreciate your feedback. And if you have any suggestions or comments for how we might improve that, please send them to me. And I would tell you that it is a work in process. We've got some really smart people here at this agency who look at this stuff on a daily basis, and they're looking at opportunities to improve how you access this information. And again, certainly your feedback is an important part of that. Next is, one of the questions that people commonly ask is, are you eligible to retire? And I think that the screen, for some reason, has pulled up blank here. Do you guys see a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 on there? Or is it blank?
That might be the next slide.
Actually, I see that it's popping up over here. My apologies. Okay, so basically, there are 4 tiers where people have become eligible for retirement. For anyone that's been in the system for a while, you're either familiar with it or have thought about it. As certain changes have taken place over the course of the last 12 years. Basically, you're a tier 1 teacher for those people who've been in the system for a number of years, where you can retire after 25 years at any age after coming into the system. And that's if you were hired on before July 1st of 2010. You're a tier 2 member if you were hired between July 1st of 2010 and June 30, 2013, where you're basically 30 and out with the rule of 80 and basically receiving your full pension after the age of 67. You're a tier 3 member if you were hired after July 1st of 2013, but before July 1st of 2019. And again, 30 and out with the rule of 80, 67 years of age, but sort of like a reduced multiplier, reduced benefit for those people who retired before that age, that meeting those age requirements. And then tier 4, which is you were hired on or after July 1st of 2019. I don't think we have anyone that falls into that category at this time, but basically it requires you to work longer in order to receive a similar benefit for the folks that would have retired earlier up into this point. Now, the reason that there are these tiers is simply because of the financial challenges that this agency is facing. Happy to report that we have over $16 billion in our trust fund that will meet the future obligations for all retirees. However, there's a goal of making sure that this program is sustainable for not just the folks that are getting the benefit today, but also the folks that are expected to be receiving benefits into the future. And obviously tiering out some of those systems, in addition to more money that we will be receiving as a result of legislation that passed this last year, are both critical components in ensuring that this benefit is sustainable for future generations. Now, let me scroll through this. So a couple of things to take into account when deciding whether or not you are eligible to retire. Obviously, we talked a little bit about that tier levels. Basically, after 30 years of service, you're expected to replace about 70%, 70.5% of your active earnings. And then certainly the other thing to consider is what are your earnings up into this point, because there's a multiplier based off of your average salary, your highest average salary, basically. And I believe that that's shown on this next slide. No, I'm jumping slides here. A couple of things that you have to take into account when looking at this information too, this is near and dear to my heart, are retiree healthcare costs. I would tell you that anyone that's looking to retire before the age of 55 may wish to reconsider, given a number of things, including the fact that there is a minimum age and increased years of service requirements in order to receive a subsidy from the Retiree Healthcare Authority. Basically, that subsidy reflects their contribution toward your monthly healthcare costs. It's important to recognize the fact that providing a Retiree Healthcare Authority program is awfully expensive, and they had not received any additional funding from the legislature in a number of years. So as a result, the agency was required to impose some additional restrictions in order to make sure that the benefit, like ours, is sustainable for future generations. So that's something that we strongly encourage you to look at when you are considering retirement, is what those healthcare costs are going to be. And in virtually every instance, anytime you're over the age of 55, especially after today, the healthcare costs go down significantly. Whereas, if you're retiring under the age of 55 until you reach the month of your 55th birthday, you're not going to be eligible for a subsidy. They no longer provide subsidies for dependent children. So if you have dependent children under the age of 26 that are on your healthcare plan, you're paying 100% of the cost for each dependent child. So if you have 3 children, you're going to take those 3 plus your spouse and plus yourself, and those costs you can see can add up fairly quickly. The other thing, that we always encourage people to look at are sort of, what your debt to equity ratio is before retiring. I mean, if your bills are still fairly high, if you've got a new auto loan and you've just taken out a new mortgage, things that we encourage you to look at before considering retirement. Now, if I was the person that's normally giving this presentation, I'm sure that they would go into a couple different caveats and why all that information is important. But I think for the most part, it's probably fairly intuitive, especially to educators. And it's something that we all take a look at before we make any financial decision, is whether or not, our retirement is going to support us into the future, and whether or not we can afford to live off of that retirement. The other thing that we encourage you to look at is when and how much your Social Security benefit is going to be. So we provide you with that contact information. Basically, when you qualify, you've probably read stuff in the news about increasing the minimum age to begin receiving the full Social Security benefits. Again, something that I think is an important component to determining whether or not you can afford to retire. A lot of us are eligible, or a lot of people are eligible to retire, but the real question is whether or not they can afford to retire. And obviously, Social Security income is something that many folks come to rely upon. Something I would strongly encourage every single person that is attending here tonight is to register for their account on our website. This is a great resource and tool that is completely underutilized at this point. I was a little bit surprised to find out that a little over a third of our entire population, both retirees and active members, have actually registered for an account that look at their information. So this gives you that opportunity to go in and verify your years of service credit, verify your demographic information, personal information, make certain updates that are important. But it also gives active employees with the opportunity to go in there and sort of calculate, what is my pension going to look like when I do retire? And that you can incorporate additional assumptions with regard to your earnings, when you plan on retiring, what your age is, and it gives you sort of a rough gauge for what you can expect in retirement. I think it's important now for those people that are thinking, well, now that the return to work rules have changed, what does that mean in terms of my opportunity to return to work and earn an additional salary in addition to my pension? And I think that, at least I'm hoping that some people are taking into consideration the additional wages or the salary increases that are becoming effective this coming fiscal year, and how that will have a positive effect on their retirement when they do finally decide to retire, just based off of the fact that it's off of your 5 highest years of earnings. But again, if you go onto our website and you look onto your NMERB account, I would encourage each of you to go through and register for an account, whether you're an active employee or a retiree. A lot of good information. We'll go through a couple of highlights on that. Again, as I mentioned before, it gives you the opportunity to estimate what your pension is going to look like. It goes through and it tells you whether or not you've purchased any airtime, and most importantly, it provides you with that benefit estimator.
David,
Yes?
so can I just interject a question here? I think you spoke about your the quarters of service or service time. I forget the word you exactly used, but can you explain that a little bit, just about if they're retiring now for the first time in May, how they may need this final quarter, that it doesn't really end until what date?
So I think that, as I understand, the way agreements work with educators is basically they go through the end of June. So unlike a state employee who retires on March 23rd and receives their last paycheck as of March 31st and starts their receiving a pension as of April 1st, it's fairly set for us in that most educators go through the end of June, which is basically 2 quarters of the calendar year. So, and we'll talk a little bit about return to work when we get there, but that sort of layout period begins after your first date of retirement, which would be technically July 1st. So that wait out period starts on July 2nd, meaning that the soonest someone could come back to work would be October 2nd. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'm not sure if that is exactly
Yes,
the question.
and you have to weigh that with, so you'd have to wait out 90 days from the end of that service quarter, and then you'd have to look at all the factors that David already spoke about, which are healthcare, health insurance, and your age, and Social Security, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of factors to consider. Also, that the wages are going up significantly, and so you would get probably you would get a higher amount per month if you were to hang on for a few more years. But anyway, I'll turn it back over to you, David.
Well, as you're looking at this slide that we have here, this is, I think, a screenshot from going in and kind of entering information into the benefit estimator. And for anyone that's decent at Excel spreadsheets, you can probably go through and plug in what your retirement is going to be, and then sort of estimate what it might be in the future if you continue to work that additional time, because you're earning additional work service credit. So it's boosting your earnings, but also at a higher rate. So as a portion of a larger salary, that's automatically boosting your earnings. But obviously some people would probably prefer to be receiving both their pension as well as a salary. I mean, that's hard to beat. It's the immediate sort of boost in pay is fairly obvious. But I think if you look over the long term, if you served an additional 3 years and it did boost your salary earnings, and then you went back to work, which we anticipate that being an option in the future, it might be beneficial for you. And certainly we're not tax advisors or financial advisors and can go through that with you. I mean, if it was my mother coming to me and saying, hey, let's figure this out together, we could probably put some spreadsheet, but something for you to take into consideration. But bottom line is, the benefit estimator provides you with a useful tool to figure out what will I earn and what could I potentially earn, because it gives you that opportunity to kind of play with what your salary earnings are going to be. Let's see here. This presentation, I think, goes through just making sure that you have this information accurately plugged in, including when the information regarding your beneficiary, if you are leaving a beneficiary. And then obviously some of it is dependent upon whether or not you select option A, B, or C. Let me get through this. Here we go. The other thing that you're going to want to do when you're seriously thinking, okay, now's the time for me to really consider where I'm at in life and whether or not I want to retire. If you go onto the form section of our website, I believe it's under active members here, you can get this benefit estimate request. You can submit that via DocuSign to our office, and we will generate a more accurate benefit estimate for you based off of what we know today. So that's definitely one of the steps you want to take into consideration as part of that process, so that you can verify what your retirement amounts are going to actually be. And then going back to the benefit calculation that you have, you can see here that it's based off of your average of your highest 5 consecutive earning years. Now, I was asked a question last week when I made a presentation. I still don't know the answer to this. So if anyone is thinking about it, I'll have to research it and get back to you. But how does it work for the anti-spiking provisions? Because some people, I believe, may go from one salary to a significantly higher salary. Now, I'm not sure whether or not anyone's skipping a tier in terms of being able to jump a tier and they're going up by $20,000 in any 1 year, but we exclude a certain percent beyond, I believe, like a 30% increase within a certain time frame. But if you have questions specific to that, please email me. I'll find out. It'd be a learning opportunity for the both of us. But again, going back to this right here, it's based off of your 5 highest earning years times the service multiplier of 2.35, which gives you your gross annual amount, and then which you divide by 12 and gives you a gross monthly benefit. I believe that the average pension benefit for someone that's in the program today is right at around $23,000 per year for members. And that's of our 52,000 members receiving an actual retirement check from us today. When you do submit that application to us for that benefit estimate, here's an example of what the information looks like, the form that you'll actually receive. We encourage you to go through, verify the accuracy of all this information, including your age, date of birth, your service credit earned, verifying the salary according to your records, and making sure that this information is accurate. Again, we've got a couple of items I will slide through here. Give me 1 second. Knowing your options. Okay. Again, option A is your highest monthly earnings opportunity. Basically, if you don't plan on leaving a beneficiary, the benefit if you were to pass away, you would take option A. If you don't have beneficiaries, you're not planning on leaving anything beyond what would be paid to a beneficiary in excess of what you've contributed into the program up until that point in time. You'd go with option A. That basically gives you the largest pension benefit. If you went with option B, which gives your beneficiary basically a matching amount, but less than you would have earned under option A, there's that option. And then under option C, it's a combination, well, it's in between the two. It's less than A, but more than B, basically giving them up to 50% after a person passes away. Retirement ahead. Again, in discussion about the application process, as soon as you think you're ready to pull the trigger on retirement, it would be helpful to contact our office to verify your information, make sure we have your correct address on file, make sure that the amount of time you assume you've put in is accurate with our records. So if there's any confusion about whether or not you have 22 or 23 years of service, or whether or not you can walk out with some combination of age and years of experience. But the other thing is just ensuring the accuracy of the information you complete on the application. Sometimes we get applications that have incomplete information, and then by the time we circle back and trying to get a hold of folks, it may result in the delay. So there's a recommendation here that you submit that application between 60 and 90 days prior to retiring. So if you're looking at an end June 30 date, we would encourage you to reach out and contact our office since now. And let's go through receiving your retirement packet. Again, emphasizing the need for you to go through and make sure that all the information is accurate, that you understand the requirements, especially with regard to notifying us of any return to work requests. And if you do return to work but fail to notify us or fill out that application, the penalties associated with doing that. Goes through, we talk a little bit about the information that you can find in your retirement packet. That information is available on our website. This includes designating a beneficiary. We're going to request a direct deposit authorization form so that we can make that monthly contribution into your checking account. The federal tax deduction form. You will have to sign off if you do not meet those age and years of service requirements under tiers 3 and 4. Notifying you that there is a slight reduction in your benefit calculator. Now, if you fall under that category, I would encourage you to look at the forms that we have here to go through the percent that it actually reduces that benefit by. I don't have them committed to memory. We do have it on this slide here. And again, if you're looking at this or want specific information about that, it's on our website, and there's an example of the form. I'm sorry, this is the selection of the beneficiary form. But we go to, give me 1 second here. Tax authorization, as we mentioned before, tax withholding form. But this form right here talks about sort of the reduction in the benefit that people receive if they retire before a certain age. Again, this was passed in law. This is something in statute. It's not something that the board or I as director have authority over. It's a requirement, and it was part of the sort of the solvency boosting efforts that have taken place over the course of the past 13 years. Now, I think probably one of the more exciting topics that most people may be interested in or thinking about are the new return to work provisions. And now there will be currently 4 different options for returning to work. Again, when you submit your retirement packet to us, there's part of the forms is acknowledging the fact that you will need to submit for approval, for our approval, whether or not you will be returning to work. Before we jump to the return to work provisions, we'll go over just sort of payroll and the cost of living adjustments that you will receive. If you retire on July 1st of this year, when you can expect to receive your first payment, your first retirement check is going to be at the end of July 31st of 2022. If you have some reciprocity agreement where you've earned both para service credit as well as ERB service credit, unfortunately, you will need to submit, or you will be receiving 2 direct different deposits from both ERB and para. Now, there's a process associated with us actually coordinating those benefits. So again, it's important that you contact both us as well as para to make sure that all of that is put in place in advance of when you can expect to receive your first pension check. Now, the cost of living adjustment, as we briefly mentioned before, if you're under tier 1 and 2, kicks in at the age of 65. If you fall under tier 3, for those people who retired after July 1st of 2013 or began after July 1st of 2013, you're looking at tier 3 and 4. That cost of living adjustment does not kick in until the age of 67. What is that cost of living adjustment? We'll get to that here shortly. But under the return to work provisions, there are several, and this is the latest and greatest information we have with regard to the updated legislation as a result of House Bill 73. But up until today, generally you can retire under one of 3 different provisions. The first of which is after a 12-month layout, after retiring and staying out of the public school system for 12 months, you could return to work with no limit on your earnings, assuming that you continue to make contributions that are non-refundable to the program. So, you know, the drawback is you're making a contribution and you're never going to receive any additional benefit. Your employer is also required to make that contribution without any additional benefit being provided to you. It is one of the things that's required of the program to remain solvent. Obviously, you would be occupying a position that would otherwise be filled and be receiving those contributions, but the fewer people we have in those making those contributions, it has a negative impact on the solvency of the program. The other option that you have is to work 0.25% of an FTE, basically 16 hours a month or less. In any instance, you're required to submit a return to work application. But under this allowance, you do not have to make any sort of employee contribution. So you're not required to make those contributions if you fall under this category. But either way, under both conditions, you're required to apply for and receive permission from ERB in order to fall under those categories. In addition, we're getting to it now. Give me 1 second. If you earn less than $15,000 per year, after 90 days, you're returning to work, but it's greater than 0.25% of an FTE. It's measured by, or it's limited by your gross earnings limit of $15,000. Again, not required to make those employee contributions to the program, but after $15,000, you're required to do one of 2 things: either suspend your pension and continue earning as an active employee, or you're required to quit working. Or the other option is obviously working for a non-ERB affiliated employer. An example of that would be going to work for the labs, Presbyterian Health Plan, organizations like that, where there's no impact upon your earnings limit. Now, on to House Bill 73 and the latest return to work allowance. So effective May 18th, and I just had a meeting before I jumped into this presentation with our staff. The new application will be made available on our website on May 18th. So anyone that retired back in January, or anyone that it will be retiring now at the end of June, can return to work after 90 days and with no earnings limit for a period of up to 36 consecutive or non-consecutive months. And the way we measure a month is if you worked a day out of a month, it actually falls under having worked an entire month. So boils right down to, if you work one day out of that month, again, it's credited as 1 month. And you have 36 both consecutive or non-consecutive time to do that. So if you work for a year and you decide, hey, you know what, not only do I prefer retirement, I'm no longer up for helping the school system out. I recognize that there was some deficiencies and I try to help out, but I'm done after this year, return to work. You can lay out. And then let's say 6 months later, you're kind of like, well, I'm kind of bored at home, and the honeydews of that list has gone too long. I'd like to return to work. Under this, you can do that for up to the additional 24 months. Now, the difference between this and the original return to work is the original return to work after the 1 year layout and no earnings limit. That provision is expected to expire, or it's not expected to, it's scheduled to expire at the end of, on January 1st of 2024. So basically we've got the rest of this year and all of next year, unless of course the law changes. Now, I'm not sure whether or not there will be any appetite by the legislature to take up additional return to work provisions after passing House Bill 73 this last year. But basically this is the difference between the two. 90 days versus 1 year, and this one allows for up to 3 years with no sunset period on it. So as an example, because this is one of the commonly asked questions, if I fall into this category, or I'm currently a return to work retiree, I'm now set to expire under the current provisions, can I now come back and work 36 months? The answer to that is yes. Or likely after the 36 months I've put in my time here, I like to return to work a quarter of the time, or under the $15,000 a year at that point in time. The answer to that, again, is you will be able to do that. And I think rounding out here, the last couple slides is our contact information, information that we hope you may find helpful in making those determinations about whether or not you qualify for retirement. As the Retiree Healthcare Authority website, again, our sister agency, Retiree Health, as well as the Public Employers Retirement Association, especially those for have any sort of reciprocity agreements in place, and Social Security. Obviously all information that you can find just by entering a quick Google search. If you have questions or concerns, one option outside of calling our office, I would tell you that we have a very large volume of phone calls right now. And similar to your profession, where there are difficult positions to fill, we are experiencing some of those same challenges in filling our call center and making sure that those, and keeping people in the call center, to be honest with you. We're looking to ramp up our recruitment and retention efforts. Apparently that's been underway for a while, but we're really hoping to get fully staffed here so that we can take your call in a timely manner. I would encourage anyone that is having difficulty getting through to us to send us an email, because beyond our normal 8 to 5 office hours, we have people that are sort of checking that email box sort of around the clock. Right now we have office locations in both Santa Fe and Albuquerque. We are in the final stages of preparing to reopen our office and open our doors. While we do have employees in the office each day, both answering phone calls and processing applications, we haven't actually opened the doors. We've prepared virtual appointments, which seems to be pretty popular, and people like that. Gives you the same opportunity to have that face-to-face customer service arrangement, but without actually having to walk into our office to fill out an application. But I completely understand the need for people to sit here and actually ask and receive their questions in a face-to-face manner. So we're working to that end. Thank you. we've got a couple of internet resources. We've got a Facebook page. I've yet to see it because Facebook is blocked here at the office. Obviously, some concerns with cybersecurity these days, and we have a Twitter account where members communicate with some of our staff. You can find some frequently asked questions on there, and you can see responses to everyone else's questions that are probably either in the same boat or have had similar questions in the past. And lastly, I think this here, one of those QR codes, we can provide this part of the presentation that we circulate out. Encourage you to sign up for receiving announcements and information from our agency. And I hope that that was neither too quickly or neither too long or too short, but that concludes my presentation. Now, obviously, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Well, it was the perfect amount of, it wasn't too slow and it wasn't too fast either. So you probably said this, but I'm the kind of person that needs to hear things twice. And so if you have completed your service time and you've sat out for 90 days and you do return, and then you decide, like, after, I mean, let's say that you work for the 36 months and then you sit out again for 90 days, are you able to come back and do it again? Or is it a one-shot deal?
So that's a great question. And I'm trying to stop sharing my screen here so I can kind of see people up on here. Sorry about that. So if you are currently a return to work retiree, and let's say you fell under the original return to work legislation that's set to expire at the end of next year, at the end of that time, I could then come back because I've already sat out a year to qualify for that original return to work, and then return to work for 36 consecutive or non-consecutive months. Okay. Now let's say I don't fall under that category and there's no extension of that legislation this next year. Let's say they decide they're not going to extend the sunset. It just expires at the end of next year. And the only return to work option are less than $15,000, 0.25 of an FTE, or the 36 months. Now let's say you come back to work in October. You can work the full 36 months. And at the end of that, if there hasn't been any adjustment made, they don't extend it to, say, let's make it 48 months or 60 months. You could then come back under one of the other provisions where you're allowed to earn up to the $15,000, which again is that same 90-day layout. So you've already met that, or no layout, basically returning for the 0.25. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Yes. And so I think there's 2 points that I want to get across here. One is that people usually get very angry when they realize information that you have said here this evening. And I think this is really an important piece. And that's why I want to make sure that everybody understands this part. So, and it's the fact that once you retire, that sets your income in New Mexico ERB for the rest of your time, right? There's no going back and unretiring or.
Well, I see that's a great question. And I saw a question come up here. It said, is there something called unretirement? So if you retire and you begin to draw your pension, one thing that we didn't mention, we talked about the options of both receiving your pension as well as drawing an additional salary. The one option you have is suspending your pension, returning to work, and continuing along, which would earn you additional service credit. And
okay, that's a very important point.
Yes, is you can return to work. So
okay, and then you can improve. Like, let's say you realize, like, whoa, I really can't live on $23,000 a year.
Right.
Like, it seemed like I could, but now I feel like I don't want to do that. And so you could suspend your pension and return, and then it would increase your service time and your high five would probably go up. Now, have you disrupted the consecutiveness of that equation? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, so now you're just adding on to it. So you're not, there's no disruption in that or any limit on how long you can return to work for if you suspend your pension.
Right. And so that's the first point I want to make is that returning to work, and David did say this, but this for some reason doesn't sometimes sink into those layers in our brain until it actually happens to us and we realize like, hey, I'm paying into retirement and I'm never going to see that earned service time and I'm never going to improve my own pension. And it's like, yes. And he said the reason for that is that you are taking a slot that would be filled in a perfect world, which we so know that we don't live in right now, would be filled by an incoming early career person. We realize that there is an educator shortage, and that is why that and the fact that they were able to get some an increased employer contribution helped to kind of stabilize the fund for current retirees. So so I think that's really important to understand, that you will continue to pay in and you will never see that money. And the district will continue to pay in and they're never going to see that money either. But let's say that this is a great way, like let's say you do retire and you go home and you're there for a year or 2 years and you decide you want to buy a new race car and you want to just work for a year, and you realize with the new salary, the salary where it is, you could work for a year and just sock that money away and you could buy, I mean, you could do it that way too. I mean, so it's all good that we have these, the ability to make these choices. But I would also say the best people to talk to, other than using that multiplier that David has referenced, so it's to talk to other retired people, you know, because they can tell you a lot too, like either things that they didn't think about before they retired, and they can, so talk to them. And oh, I was just looking at that. Now I'm confused. I can.
Sorry, I saw the questions popping up here.
Yeah.
So can you unretire for 3 years and increase your retirement income? The answer to that is yes. So again, let's say you retired and you're thinking to yourself, hey, salaries are much better than when I retired. Let me go back to work and I'll put in a full 5 years. I'll put in a full 5 years at this new tier 3 salary of $70,000. That's going to boost your average, you know, in addition to earning you additional service credit, because you earn service credit for every year of service. 2.35% of your salary is earned every single year. At that point in time, you're going to go through and you're going to base your salary, when your pension, when you begin to receive it again, off of that new calculation. Your increased years of service along with that increased salary.
So the other point that this is a public service announcement for unions here, so just bear with me, David. But so Mary Lou Cameron is the former president of NEA New Mexico. She was an educator, still is an educator in Deming. But one of the things that we do when we join together in this thing called a union is we provide oversight. And because we have to do that. And I know when ERB changed from being a 25-year venture to a 30-year deal, my husband and I were like at around 18 years at that point, and we went and testified at the ERB hearing for people that came after us that they wouldn't have to work 30 years before they would be fully, I don't know if you say fully vested or whatever, I'm not sure.
Receive your maximum pension, basically.
Right, right. Because for people, when I started working, it was our age and our years would qualify us after 25 years. Now that's no longer the case. And so we do have somebody that serves, one of our members serves on the ERB board. And the same is true in insurance. In the public schools insurance that we provide oversight to make sure that a rank and file educator is on that board, representing people like ourselves, even though we don't understand. I know when I first got on the board, I didn't understand a whole lot of anything that was going on, but I certainly learned, you know, we are really smart people too. So we are able to learn, and I did learn. But if you are an educator here, you know, and this is one thing that we really have to teach the folks coming behind us, is that sometimes it isn't just about us. It's also about the people that we're trying to nurture that are going to come after us, because I believe that educators care about their profession and they care about the students in New Mexico. And that's a factor too. But we also know that it's gotten really hard. You know, the pandemic's been very difficult. And so some people are ready to leave. I do think that you should use that multiplier, and you should really look at where you're going to fall in your monthly income, and make sure that you've allowed yourself time, and then work with a person in your district who handles retirement, because they can help you also. But there are some things that you have to do and you have to get in place, and you just want to make sure that you're doing that in your own best interest. So you want to talk to as many people as you probably can, to make sure that you understand what you need to understand. So other than that, I don't know, David, if there's anything else you want to add. We would actually be letting these people go like a few minutes early. That'd be great.
Well, I hope they appreciate that. I hope that we were able to answer their questions. I think that the questions that I saw come up, I believe that we answered accurately, but obviously they have my email address, and you're certainly welcome to email me, and what I don't know, we'll find an answer for. Again, I'd say thank you educators, because it's an important role. The role you guys play in my children's life is incredibly important, and I thank you, and I recognize how important it is. I used to think being an educator would be sort of an ideal job, having summers off and things like that, and I have a totally different perspective now as an adult, and certainly seeing my kids go through that process as well.
Yeah, so it's David Archuleta, and his name is in his email, which is there in the chat, and you can certainly reach out to us at NEA New Mexico too, and we can help you find David. But we also will be sharing the slides if there's something you want to go through. We do that with Secretary Steinhaus also. He brings slides about like these new increases, and that way you can just refer to the slides and you know that you've got the information correct, because you're hearing it from the executive director. And
I see a couple things coming up here. It says I don't see, so just very simply david.archuleta@state.nm.us. I see Steve just popped that up too, but very simply just my first and last name at state.nm.us.
And it's in the slides that we will send you as well. So yes, and I hope that you found this helpful. And so with that, we will say goodnight to David and let him go get some dinner or whatever he needs to do. And we appreciate you, David, and we're glad that you are the new executive.
And I appreciate you. And let me know when you want me to come back and have another go at this. Hopefully I can make it better. Thank you.
It was great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thanks for coming.